March 6, 1944, 28,000 feet above Berlin, Major Günther Rall, Jagdgeschwader 11, rolls his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6 into attack position. Below him, 360 B-17 flying fortresses are approaching the German capital. This is the first major American daylight raid on Berlin, and Rall is one of Germany's highest-scoring aces, 275 confirmed victories. Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords. He has shot down Soviet aircraft on the Eastern Front, British aircraft over the Channel, and American bombers over Germany. He knows how to kill B-17s, attack from head-on, high closing speed, 20mm cannon shells into the cockpit and engines, break away before defensive fire can track you. He has done this hundreds of times, and he prepares to do it again. But something is different today. The bombers are not alone. They have escorts, single-engine fighters, at 28,000 feet, over Berlin. This should be impossible. No single-engine fighter has the range to escort bombers from England to Berlin and back. The distance is over 500 miles one way. British Spitfires turn back at the German border. American P-47s turn back over Western Germany. And German fighters, freed from escort opposition, tear into the bomber formations. This has been the pattern for 2 years. But today, these escort fighters, they are not turning back. They are here, over Berlin, and Rall recognizes the type. P-51 Mustangs. He has heard of them. Intelligence reports from Western Front. Fast, long-ranged. But German pilots who encountered them reported weaknesses. The Mustang is optimized for high-altitude bomber escort, not dogfighting. It has good speed, but poor maneuverability compared to German fighters. And Luftwaffe doctrine says speed without maneuverability is a liability in combat. Rall believes this. Every German pilot believes this. Rall pushes his stick forward, dives toward the bomber formation. His wingman follows. Standard attack, 2 1-9s, head-on pass, maximum firepower, minimum exposure to defensive fire. Rall selects his target, a B-17 in the lead element. He closes rapidly. 1,000 meters, 800, 600, and then a Mustang appears. From above, diving faster than Rall expected, and the Mustang opens fire. 6 50 caliber machine guns. Tracers stream past Rall's canopy, and Rall brakes right, hard, abandons his attack on the bomber, because this Mustang, it is not where it should be. It is not escorting bombers passively. It is hunting aggressively, and it is fast, faster than Rall expected. He tries to turn inside the Mustang's attack, use his 109 superior turning radius. But the Mustang does not try to turn with him. It extends, uses speed, climbs back to altitude, and resets for another attack. And Rall realizes this American pilot knows what he is doing. He is not fighting Rall's fight. He is fighting his own fight, using his aircraft's strengths and negating Rall's advantages. More Mustangs are arriving. Rall sees them, diving from altitude, attacking German fighters as they approach the bombers. The entire dynamic of the battle has changed. German fighters cannot reach the bombers without fighting through escort fighters that are faster, have equal or better altitude performance, and are being flown by pilots who refuse to engage in disadvantageous combat. Rall's wingman is hit, trails smoke, dives away, and Rall is alone. Surrounded by Mustangs, he dives, uses his 109's dive performance, escapes, barely, returns to base, his aircraft undamaged, his confidence shattered, and his report to his Geschwader commander will be read with disbelief. The Americans have deployed a fighter that can escort bombers to Berlin, and German fighters cannot stop them. This changes everything. The war in the air over Germany is about to be lost, and the weapon that will deliver this defeat is a fighter German pilots mocked, until today. This engagement, March 6, 1944, represents the turning point in the strategic bombing campaign over Germany. The moment when American bombers, which had been suffering catastrophic losses on unescorted deep penetration raids, gained protection that German fighters could not overcome. And the weapon that achieved this was the North American P-51 Mustang, a fighter that German intelligence had dismissed as unsuited for European combat, a fighter that Luftwaffe aces had ridiculed as another fast but clumsy American design, but a fighter that would prove, through performance and production, that American industrial capacity and tactical doctrine could defeat German skill and experience. This is the story of how the Mustang transformed from an object of German contempt to the symbol of American air superiority over the Reich, how one aircraft broke the Luftwaffe's defensive dominance, and how German aces, who had ruled European skies for 4 years, found themselves hunted by an enemy they had underestimated fatally. Major Günther Rall was real, third highest scoring fighter ace in history, 275 confirmed victories. He survived being shot down 8 times, wounded 3 times, and lived to age 91, dying in 2009. His post-war memoirs and interviews provided invaluable Luftwaffe perspective on American fighters. Rall flew on the Eastern Front from 1941 to 1943, transferred to the Western Front in late 1943, and fought American bombers and escorts until war's end. His assessment of the Mustang, recorded in multiple post-war interviews, was consistent. The P-51 was the fighter that ended German air superiority over the Reich, not because it was perfect, but because it was good enough, and America built thousands of them. In a 1987 interview preserved in the United States Air Force Oral History Program, Rall stated, "We had been told the Mustang was a bomber escort, designed for long range, good speed at altitude, but weak in maneuverability and low altitude performance. When I first engaged them over Berlin in March 1944, I discovered this assessment was incomplete. Yes, the Mustang was optimized for bomber escort, but it was also a capable fighter. Fast at all altitudes, good acceleration, excellent dive performance. And American pilots, while less experienced on average than Luftwaffe veterans, were well trained in energy tactics. They did not try to turn fight with us. They used speed and altitude, boom and zoom attacks, and when we tried to attack the bombers, Mustangs intercepted us, forced us to fight them first. This was new. Previous American escorts could not do this because they lacked range and altitude performance. The Mustang had both, and that made it decisive. The North American P-51 Mustang was not born from American military requirements. It was born from British desperation. April 1940. The Royal Air Force needed fighters immediately. The Battle of France was collapsing. The RAF faced potential invasion, and existing fighter production, Hurricanes and Spitfires, was insufficient. The British Purchasing Commission approached North American Aviation with an order for Curtiss P-40 Warhawks. North American's President James Kindleberger made a bold proposal. We can design and build a superior fighter in the same time frame it would take to set up P-40 production. The British agreed. 120 days later, October 26, 1940, the prototype NA-73 flew. Designated Mustang Mk1 by the RAF. Initial tests showed promise. Good low altitude performance, excellent range. But the Allison V1710 engine limited high altitude capability. Above 15,000 feet, performance degraded significantly. The breakthrough came in April 1942. Rolls-Royce test pilot Ronald Harker flew a Mustang at the Royal Aircraft Establishment, recognized immediately that fitting it with a Merlin engine would transform performance. The modification was tested in October 1942, Mustang X prototype with Rolls-Royce Merlin 61 engine. Results exceeded all expectations. Top speed increased to 441 miles per hour at 29,800 feet. Service ceiling increased to 42,000 feet. The aircraft that had been adequate at low altitude became exceptional at high altitude and retained its extraordinary range. With drop tanks, combat radius exceeded 750 miles. This was unprecedented for a single-engine fighter. The United States Army Air Forces recognized the Mustang's potential immediately, ordered the P-51B variant with Packard-built Merlin V1650 engines. First deliveries to operational units occurred in November 1943. 8th Air Force, based in England, received priority, and the Mustang began flying bomber escort missions in December 1943. Initial missions were to targets in France and Western Germany, within American fighters' previous range capabilities, but the Mustang's performance was immediately apparent. It could maintain formation with bombers at 25,000 feet without difficulty, could accelerate rapidly when engaging German fighters, and had endurance exceeding any previous escort fighter. German intelligence first noted P-51 Mustangs in combat over Europe in intelligence summaries from December 1943. Initial assessments compiled from pilot debriefings and captured documents were dismissive. The Mustang was classified as a long-range escort fighter, optimized for sustained cruise at high altitude. This implied, to German analysts, that the aircraft would be weak in acceleration and maneuverability. German fighter doctrine emphasized these characteristics: the ability to outturn and outclimb opponents in close combat. And German fighters, particularly the Focke-Wulf FW-190 and Messerschmitt Bf-109, excelled at this type of combat. German pilots who encountered Mustangs in December 1943 and January 1944 reported that American pilots avoided turning combat, used speed to disengage when pressed. This confirmed German assumptions. The Mustang was fast but not agile, not a serious threat to experienced Luftwaffe pilots. This confidence was based on experience. Luftwaffe fighters had dominated European skies from 1939 through 1942. They had defeated the French Air Force in weeks, defeated the RAF over France, fought the RAF to a standstill over Britain, and inflicted severe losses on Soviet aviation. German pilots were professionals. Many had hundreds of flight hours before their first combat mission. And German fighter tactics, developed through years of combat, emphasized individual initiative, situational awareness, and exploitation of aircraft performance advantages. This was the culture that produced aces with over 100 victories. Pilots like Adolf Galland, Werner Mulders, and Günther Rall. And this culture created confidence that bordered on arrogance. German pilots believed they were the best in the world, and for 4 years, combat results supported this belief. But by late 1943, the Luftwaffe faced challenges that skill alone could not overcome. Losses on the Eastern Front were severe. Pilot training programs, which had produced highly skilled pilots in peacetime, were compressed to meet demand. Training hours decreased from approximately 240 hours in 1941 to less than 160 hours in 1943. And fuel shortages meant less flight time for operational units. The Luftwaffe remained formidable, but it was not the force that had dominated Europe in 1940. And the Americans were coming, with bombers, thousands of bombers, and now with the Mustang, with escorts that could protect those bombers all the way to the target and back. The strategic bombing campaign over Germany had begun in 1942 with small raids. By 1943, the 8th Air Force was launching raids with hundreds of bombers, targeting German industrial capacity, ball-bearing plants, aircraft factories, oil refineries, and Luftwaffe defences were extracting a terrible price. The raid on Schweinfurt on October 14, 1943, lost 60 B-17s out of 291 dispatched, a 20% loss rate. This was unsustainable, and deep penetration raids into Germany were suspended until adequate fighter escort could be provided. The P-47 Thunderbolt could escort bombers to Western Germany, but lacked range for Berlin or targets in Eastern Germany. The solution was the Mustang, with its exceptional range and high-altitude performance. German defensive doctrine relied on time and distance. British and American bombers based in England had to fly hundreds of miles to reach targets in Germany. This gave German radar ample warning, allowed fighters to scramble, climb to altitude, and position for attack. And once Allied escorts turned back due to fuel limitations, German fighters had free rein. They could attack bomber formations systematically, from advantageous positions, with minimal risk from defensive fire if they employed proper tactics. This system worked until escorts stopped turning back. The first Mustang escorted raid to Berlin was March 4, 1944. Bad weather forced recall. The mission was reflown March 6th. 660 bombers dispatched. 360 reached Berlin, escorted by P-51 Mustangs from the 55th, 20th, 4th, and 354th Fighter Groups. German defences scrambled approximately 150 fighters, Bf-109s and Fw-190s from multiple Jagdgeschwader. Commanders expected the American escorts to turn back at the German border as usual. When Mustangs appeared over Berlin, German pilots were shocked, disbelieving. This violated everything they understood about fighter range limitations. Single-engine fighters could not fly from England to Berlin. It was mathematically impossible, except the Mustangs were there, and they were not low on fuel. They had combat endurance over the target, and they fought aggressively. Oberleutnant Heinz Knoke, Jagdgeschwader 11, encountered Mustangs over Berlin on March 6th. His diary entry, published post-war in his memoir I Flew for the Führer, described the engagement. We were climbing to intercept the bomber stream when American fighters appeared. At first, I thought they were P-47s. Then I saw the distinctive belly radiator scoop, Mustangs. But this was impossible. We were over Berlin, 500 miles from England. These fighters should not have the range, but they were here, and they attacked immediately. I engaged one. He did not try to turn with me. He used speed, dove away. I followed but could not catch him. He was faster than my 109 at all altitudes, and he climbed back to altitude faster than I expected. This was not the performance profile we had been briefed on. Intelligence had told us the Mustang was optimized for range, not performance. But this aircraft had both, and the pilot knew how to use it. The bomber losses on March 6 were 43 aircraft, approximately 6%. This was acceptable. More importantly, the bombers had reached Berlin, dropped their bombs, and returned. The psychological impact was enormous. Berlin had been bombed in daylight by the Americans, and German fighters had failed to prevent it. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, had promised this would never happen. But it had. And the weapon that made it possible was the Mustang. German Jagdwaffe Command analysed the March 6th raid in detail. After-action reports from multiple Jagdgeschwader were compiled, and a pattern emerged. American fighter pilots were employing tactics that negated German advantages. They maintained altitude, attacked from high-speed dives, and disengaged before German fighters could respond effectively. They did not attempt sustained turning combat, did not try to outmaneuver German fighters. Instead, they used energy tactics, maintaining speed and altitude advantage. This was boom and zoom combat, and it worked because the Mustang had performance to execute it. Speed comparable to or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes, excellent acceleration, and superior dive characteristics due to laminar flow wing design. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, General of Fighters and one of Germany's most decorated aces, with 104 confirmed victories, issued a tactical directive to Jagdwaffe units on March 15, 1944. According to declassified Luftwaffe documents translated by Allied intelligence, Galland wrote, "Enemy P-51 fighter has demonstrated capability to escort bomber formations to any target in Reich. Aircraft possesses performance equal to our best fighters with superior range. Enemy pilots employ energy tactics negating our maneuverability advantages. Recommend avoiding prolonged engagement with P-51 unless holding decisive advantage in altitude or numbers. Priority is destruction of bombers. Engage escort only when necessary to reach bomber formations." This directive reveals German recognition that the Mustang had changed the tactical situation fundamentally. German fighters could no longer ignore American escorts, could no longer wait for escorts to turn back. They had to fight through the escorts to reach bombers, and fighting through meant taking losses. Losses Germany could not afford. Because by March 1944, German pilot training and replacement systems were collapsing under pressure. The Luftwaffe was losing experienced pilots faster than they could be replaced, and replacement pilots, arriving at operational units with minimal training, survived only a few missions on average before being killed or shot down. The kill ratio tells the story. In January 1944, before Mustangs became operational in large numbers, 8th Air Force fighter groups claimed approximately 1.5 German aircraft destroyed for every American fighter lost. By April 1944, this ratio had increased to approximately 3.5 to 1. By June, it exceeded 4 to 1. This was not primarily because American pilots suddenly became more skilled. It was because they were flying superior aircraft and employing doctrine that exploited that superiority, and because German pilot quality was declining as losses mounted and training compressed. Major Walter Dahl, Geschwaderskommodore of Jagdgeschwader 300, one of the Luftwaffe's most experienced bomber-destroyer units, provided post-war analysis to U.S. Air Force historical investigators. According to Air Force Historical Research Agency documents, Dahl stated, "The appearance of P-51 Mustang in large numbers over Germany in spring 1944 marked the turning point in air war over Reich. We could no longer mass our forces against bomber formations without first fighting through escort fighters that were faster than us, could climb with us, and were flown by pilots trained specifically to counter our tactics. Our losses increased, while our effectiveness against bombers decreased. By summer 1944, we were losing the air war, not through lack of courage or determination, but through attrition we could not sustain. Americans built more fighters faster than we could destroy them, trained more pilots faster than we could kill them, and their Mustang was good enough that numerical superiority became decisive. The technical specifications of the P-51D, the definitive Mustang variant, explain its effectiveness. Maximum speed 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Service ceiling 41,900 feet. Combat radius with drop tanks 750 miles. This meant Mustangs could escort bombers to any target in Germany and have combat endurance over the target. Armament was 650 caliber M2 Browning machine guns with 1,880 rounds total. Rate of fire approximately 850 rounds per minute per gun. This provided devastating firepower. A 2-second burst from all 6 guns put nearly 200 rounds into the target area. Against German fighters with minimal armor, this was lethal. The Packard 51650 engine, a license-built Rolls-Royce Merlin, produced 1,690 horsepower at war emergency power. 2-stage, 2-speed supercharger maintained power output at high altitude. This gave the Mustang performance advantages over German fighters at altitudes where bomber combat typically occurred. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, the most common Luftwaffe fighter in late 1944, was powered by Daimler-Benz DB 605 engine, producing 1,475 horsepower. At 25,000 feet, the 109 was slower than the Mustang, could not accelerate as quickly, and had inferior dive performance. The Focke-Wulf FW190A8, powered by BMW 801 radial engine, had excellent low and medium altitude performance, but above 25,000 feet, performance degraded significantly. The 190 could not compete with Mustangs at bomber combat altitudes. Later variants, the FW190D9 with Jumo 2113 inline engine and the TA152 with improved high-altitude performance, addressed these deficiencies, but they entered service too late and in insufficient numbers to affect the outcome. German industry attempted to counter American numerical superiority through technological advancement. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, entered service in summer 1944. Maximum speed 540 miles per hour, armed with 4 30mm cannons. The Me-262 was faster than any Allied piston engine fighter, could attack bomber formations with minimal risk from escort fighters if employed correctly. But production was limited. Approximately 1,400 Me-262s were built, and operational availability was low due to engine reliability issues. The Jumo 04 turbojet had a service life of approximately 25 hours between overhauls. This meant Me-262s spent more time undergoing maintenance than flying combat missions, and Allied fighters, particularly Mustangs, learned to attack Me-262s during takeoff and landing when they were vulnerable. American production overwhelmed German technological advantages. Over 15,000 P-51 Mustangs were built during the war. Production peaked at over 400 aircraft per month in 1944. This meant losses could be replaced immediately, and numerical superiority could be maintained regardless of combat attrition. German Me-262 production, by contrast, never exceeded 100 aircraft per month, and even this limited production could not be sustained as Allied bombing disrupted transportation and materials supply. The strategic implications were clear by summer 1944. American bombers, escorted by Mustangs, could strike any target in Germany with acceptable losses. German industrial capacity was being systematically destroyed. Oil production collapsed. Aircraft production decreased, and the Luftwaffe, starved of fuel and replacement aircraft, could not contest American air superiority. By September 1944, 8th Air Force was conducting missions with over 1,000 bombers and 700 to 800 escort fighters. German defenses could scramble perhaps 200 to 300 fighters. The numerical disparity was overwhelming. Major Wilhelm Herges, Jagdgeschwader 11, one of the Luftwaffe's highest-scoring aces against American bombers with 73 four-engine bomber kills among his 114 total victories, described the hopelessness of the situation in post-war interrogation transcripts. By autumn 1944, we were fighting not to win but to survive. Every mission we flew, we were outnumbered 5 or 10 to 1. American fighters were everywhere, Mustangs especially. They had altitude advantage, speed advantage, numbers advantage, and their pilots, while individually less skilled than our veterans, fought intelligently, used their aircraft strengths, avoided our strengths, and worked together. We flew individually because we had no choice, not enough experienced pilots to maintain formation discipline, and we died individually, shot down by fighters we never saw, from attacks we could not counter. The Mustang did not win through superior performance alone. It won through being good enough and being numerous enough that our skill could not overcome their numbers. The Battle of Berlin, fought in the skies over Germany from March through April 1944, demonstrated American air power's dominance. 8th Air Force flew multiple large-scale raids on Berlin and other German cities. Losses were acceptable. German fighter losses were catastrophic. Luftwaffe records show approximately 433 fighters lost in combat during March 1944. Over 200 pilots killed. These were losses Germany could not sustain. Pilot training schools could not produce replacements fast enough, and those replacements had perhaps 60 to 80 flight hours, compared to American replacement pilots with over 200 hours. The quality gap was widening as the numerical gap widened, and the Mustang was the weapon that enabled this attrition. Post-war analysis by both American and German historians confirmed the Mustang's decisive role. Dr. Richard Overy, British historian and author of The Bombing War, wrote that the P-51 Mustang was the weapon that made strategic bombing of Germany effective. Prior to the Mustang's deployment, bomber losses on deep penetration raids were unsustainable. After the Mustang achieved operational status in large numbers, bomber losses decreased to acceptable levels, while German fighter losses increased dramatically. This allowed sustained bombing campaign that destroyed German industrial capacity and crippled the Luftwaffe. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, in his post-war memoir, The First and the Last, assessed the impact of the Mustang candidly. The appearance of P-51 Mustang over Germany spelled the beginning of the end for the Jagdwaffe. We could no longer defend the Reich effectively against American daylight bombing. Our losses were unsustainable. Our replacement pilots were inadequately trained, and American production of fighters and pilots exceeded anything we could match. The Mustang was not invincible. Individual German pilots shot down Mustangs, but we could not shoot down enough to matter. For every Mustang we destroyed, 3 more appeared, and our losses were irreplaceable. By summer 1944, I knew we had lost the air war. The only question was how long we could delay the inevitable. Major Günther Rall survived the war. He shot down his final aircraft, an American P-47 Thunderbolt, on May 3, 1945, days before German surrender. His final tally was 275 confirmed victories, 3rd highest in history. After the war, Rall joined the reconstituted German Air Force in 1956, rose to Lieutenant General, commanded German Air Force Tactical Command, and retired in 1975. He maintained friendships with former enemies, including American pilots who had fought against him. In a 1995 interview, Rall reflected on the Mustang. It was the right aircraft at the right time, not the best fighter of the war in terms of pure performance. The Me-262 was faster, the Ta-152 had better high-altitude performance. But the Mustang was good enough, and America built thousands. That combination, adequate performance in massive numbers, that is what defeated us. We had quality, they had quantity. And in industrial warfare, quantity wins. The Mustang proved that. The legacy of the P-51 Mustang extends beyond World War II. It remained in service with various air forces into the 1980s. It saw combat in Korea, in counterinsurgency operations in Latin America. And it proved that a well-designed aircraft can remain effective for decades. But its primary legacy is strategic. The Mustang was the weapon that made strategic bombing doctrine viable. That broke the Luftwaffe's defensive capability. And that proved American industrial capacity, when properly directed, could produce weapons in sufficient quantity to overwhelm any opponent. German aces who mocked the Mustang in late 1943 learned otherwise by spring 1944. They learned that speed and range, combined with adequate maneuverability and overwhelming numbers, defeat superior turning performance and superior training when those advantages cannot be brought to bear. They learned that American pilots, less experienced individually but well-trained in energy tactics and supported by superior logistics, could win through systematic application of advantages rather than individual brilliance. And they learned that industrial warfare rewards the nation that can sustain production and replacement, not the nation with the best individual weapons or the most skilled individual warriors. The Mustang escorted bombers to Berlin, and by doing so, ended German air superiority, ended the Luftwaffe's ability to defend the Reich, and contributed decisively to Allied victory, not through one dramatic battle, but through relentless, systematic attrition that Germany could not counter. The mocking stopped in March 1944 and never resumed because the joke was on Germany, and the punchline was American industrial might applied through one exceptional aircraft produced in overwhelming numbers.